Father, we just thank you for this day. Goodness, Father, what a glorious time to be alive. We just want to exalt your mighty, mighty name because you are the Almighty who watches over us and teaches us your ways. So we just thank you for all that you are. Thank you for teaching us your language, your sacred language, Abba. I ask that you put the words in Eric's mouth so that we can hear and see the concepts of what it is that our brother David, the beloved, is teaching us about his love for your language. Thank you, Abba, for giving us a heart for such things. Thank you for lighting up the light of the words on our hearts, and may we go forth and proclaim your greatness from this day and forever. Hallelujah. Amen.
Amen. This is the letter TzADI of the Psalm 119 study. Happens to be August 3rd of 25. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph for his foes. He rose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his Kadoshim to reign. So TzADI has to do with the resurrection. It's a sprout. The word TzADI without the Q is the name of the letter. Zadik. TzADI Dalet Kuf is the way it's spelled, means righteous, but it also means victory, deliverance, salvation, justice. So stop and think about that for a minute. Instead of thinking, oh, here's TzADI and it means these different things, picture it as a whole. It doesn't, let's say, mean righteousness, victory, deliverance, salvation, justice, resurrection. TzADI are those fringes that we're supposed to tie for ourselves and wear. That's TzADI Yod, TzADI Yod. Tzitzi Vav Tav is plural, so TzADI Yod is something with a Zod Yod suffix makes it personal, my. So it's basically something spelled TzADI Yod is my TzADI, or my. What is the TzADI? Well, it's a flourish, it's a flare, it's a fringe, it's something that flies. This gesture I'm making, that's TzADI. It's a flag on a pole that's blowing in the wind, as it were. I'm showing the paleo. Here's the main center, the staff, as it were, the flagpole, and then the flag is wafting in the wind. It's shaped like what we would write the Arabic number 2, the Arabic numeral 2. That's the shape of the TzADI. Okay, so if the TzADI is something alive, something blossoming, the butterfly crawling out of its chrysalis and opening up its wings to fly. It had been a caterpillar, now it's this butterfly. Never done that before. So, but with the butterfly, it's not a new creature, it's a resurrected new form of the creature. So YHUH, resurrecting from the dead, well, that's the TzADI. Because if he's Zion put to the weapon, put into the tomb, and he's there, dark domain, 3 days and 3 nights. Well, you can't get Friday afternoon to Sunday morning, 3 days and 3 nights. Even if you said, well, it's any part of a day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday day. So he had to be in there, if they calculate a day at evening. Let's pretend the day starts at 6 p.m. He'd have to go into the grave, let's say 5 p.m. or 3 p.m. Anytime before 6, even 5:55. Okay, he's in there for a day. Okay, that's say Friday day, and then Friday night, and then Saturday day, and then Saturday night. Well, if you raise Sunday morning, even if a day started, well, when does the day start? It would have to start in the evening. Well, then, see, you don't get 3 days and 3 nights, no matter how you look at it. So whoever calculated Good Friday when Jesus was crucified and then he rose from the dead, well, they rose up early. The women rose up early, remember, and They went to go look. The word shachar is the just beginnings of the light before dawn. It can also mean black and dark brown, but it can also mean morning light. So it's not boker, it's not daybreak, but it's not. So see, you get these words and say, well, where's the dividing line between this phase and that phase? The word rev means blending, mixing. So in English, the word evening means you even something out. If you have this here and that there, and you're going to blend some. So you put a couple of ingredients in a mixing bowl for making food, and now they say, well, stir thoroughly. Well, you're blending, evening, getting the proportions all pretty well balanced rather than a big clump here and something not over there. That's the word evening. The word is ayin resh bet. We're going to bump into that word later on today, ayin resh bet. A rev, also known as Arab or Arab, also known as, if you're well mixed and you go to a party and you socialize pretty well. So that's what it means. And it also means like if you have a horde of locusts, swarm, gnats, so many mosquitoes, you can't sit there and count them because they're moving all around. And so it's just this big mixture of not confusion in a bad way, but confusion meaning you can't designate and specify. That's ayin resh bet. But this letter TzADI is not this mixture of can't identify. It's this flag, boom, flying, the notable designated, there it is. Well, that's kind of like resh. So the interesting thing is that pei is that mouth that opens. That was the previous letter. So you got Samic ayin pei in the Mishkan pattern in the what's called the holy place, the Kadosh place. And then you've got this veil. So we did the third Selah last week, like this veil between the altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant, between the holy place, the Holy of Holies, the Kadosh place, and the Kadosh Kodoshim, translated holy, holies. But then the Ark of the Covenant all alone, and nobody is allowed to go in there except only the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol. Kohen is priest, Gadol is great, regarded, highly respected. And he could only go in once a year on the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And even if he was in an unclean state, or if the whole nation was in an unclean state, he would have just dropped dead. And I heard Michael Rood was talking once a long time ago that they'd tie a rope around the guy's foot, and he had little bells on the bottom of his garment. And if he's moving around, pouring the blood on the altar of the Ark of the Covenant on the top of it there, mercy seat, as it was called, he'd be making some noise and jingle jangling. But if that stopped, all of a sudden it's like, well, I think he was struck dead. So let's drag him out by his foot. And it's like, well, try again next year to see if we're accepted as a nation, as a people, as a country, in the eyes and the regard and the face of Elohim. So this concept of TzADI in the ALEF-BEIT song, TzADI stands alone, though all Israel shall become. So YHUH rose from the dead, and he was the first born of many brethren. He was the first fruits. At Shavuot, during the week, there's different ways of regarding it, but during the week of unleavened bread, on the day after the Shabbat, so does that mean the first day, which was a Shabbat Shabbaton, a holy day, a Kadosh day? So it would automatically be the next day. Or if you calculate it that when it says the day after the Shabbat, it's a 7-day week of unleavened bread. So there's going to be a Shabbat, let's call it Saturday for the moment, a Saturday within that week. And so the very next day would be Sunday, as it's called. So then you start counting 7 sevens and you end up with the 50th day. So it's always Pentecost, then always counting 50, always ends up on a Sunday, unless you count it otherwise. Just so you know, there's different regards of these matters. We'll get to that too. There's different regards of these matters of the calendar. When does a day start? When does a week start? When does a month start? Full moon, first sliver, sighted in Jerusalem, sighted here where I can see it. Or maybe it's the conjunction. Maybe it has nothing to do with the moon. Maybe it has to do with the 13 houses, stars, constellation groups. If I say nobody knows, it's like, well, why don't you just ask the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit? He'll lead you into the truth. And if you're not asking him and you're not getting the answer, then too bad, shame on you. And it's like, there's a lot of ideas out there. And I can't tell you which is which. I can tell you that I got to go with something, at least this year. Maybe I'll change next year. I have some ideas that certain things maybe are more likely than others, but it's like, I'm not trying to push my own agenda. I'm trying to regard the things we're told to regard. How do you do that? So, as in the ALEF-BEIT song, TzADI stands alone, though all Israel shall become. If Yeshua is the first harvest was the wave sheaf. So they go out and they find some barley ready to harvest. The priest, they cut it and they lift it up. And nobody's allowed to cut any of the other crop until the priest has done that. So he never said, okay, at the beginning of the year, you got to find a V barley. And it's like, where does that command? It's not a written out command. But yet, during the week of unleavened bread, which comes basically 2 weeks, or it's the third week after the beginning of the year, the beginning of the month of Aviv, springtime, sprouting, the gateway of youth and vigor. If the barley's not ready to harvest, you're not going to cut it and make food with it, make bread with it. So if the barley's not ready, you got to wait till the next month. That's how that's determined. It's a logical determination. It's not a command per se. Thou shalt go into the field and find the first little bit of Aviv barley. Just so you know. But once you harvest that first sheaf and you lift it up, wave it unto Elohim, now you can go out in the fields and start harvesting, because right on the heels of that, everything else is ready to harvest. So that's why the one and only first is that first sheaf, like Yahusha raising from the dead, and then others with him, and then all of us have that hope and expectation to follow in his train, as it's called, in his wake. Well, who gets to resurrect? Well, now this is another big question. If you look in the book of Revelation, it talks about the first resurrection, and then there's the later resurrection. The first resurrection, it says, the righteous, well, the unrighteous don't get to resurrect until later, and then they get judged. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Who are the unrighteous? Who's to distinguish between the righteous and unrighteous? I thought that was determined at Judgment Day. I mean, there's none righteous. No, not one. That's what another verse elsewhere says. Well, God's people, those who are the bride of Christ, those are the righteous ones. Those who have accepted Jesus as their Savior, they're the righteous ones. So we're told. And yet we're told righteousness is doing what Yahweh said. So if the doctrine of the people that say, believe in Jesus and you're considered righteous, says those laws and commands are not for us, then you can't do what he said, because you're not even regarding his laws and commands. And therefore, according to that calculation, you can't be righteous. Well, no, we're righteous because we believe in Jesus. But Yahweh never said that to his people in the Old Testament. The belief is that he implied it, but he never said it. What he said was, do what I said. And so there's a bunch of verses where the people of Israel get in big trouble for not listening to his voice and not doing what he said. As a matter of fact, what they got in trouble for, because they didn't listen to his voice and do what he said, they did contrary to what he said, and that's what they got in trouble for. As a matter of fact, there's this concept that your way is returned upon your own head. And there's a verse can't tell you the address of where it is, but he says, Yahweh says, he's so upset, he's just wants to kill everybody, kind of like he did at the flood and kind of like at Sodom and Gomorrah. He was going to do that to Israel, and he says, but I'm not going to punish you. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. He says, I'm not going to just beat you up or punish you or do all these terrible things that I think you deserve. I'm going to chastise you with mishpat. That's your own way brought back on your own head. So that's the mishpat. That's the punishment, or that's the way that stuff happens. Your own way is brought back on your own head. And there's a verse we're going to look at in Isaiah where he said, I think it's Isaiah 40, where he says, okay, Israel, Yahweh's Elohim has paid you back double for your sins. And it's like, whoa. It's like, wait a minute. That's supposed to be balanced scales. That's not fair. That's not, if I do something, you hit me double. Well, that's the rules. Whatever you do is you're going to get, like if you're a thief and you steal something in the Torah, it says, well, you got to pay back 7 times. Wow, 7 times. You know, I remember being a very young grade school, and you go to the store and, you know, you steal a piece of something. Let's say it's a piece of candy. It's like, why would you do that? And it's like the evil inclination, as it's called, whatever. Why would you do that? Anyway, little kids do stuff and they're taught, do not do that by their parents, you get busted by the store manager. You're really scared. They're going to call the cops on you. You got to pay back, let's say, a nickel for the candy. Oh no, you got to pay back 7 times. It's like, oh, I don't even have a nickel. That's why I went to take it. It's like big trouble. Now you got to work and earn the money and pay it back. And it's like, well, that's what the Torah says. But is Yahweh really going to make us pay back double? If he says the penalty is 7 times, we pay back double, is that 14 times? I mean, what exactly are the rules of justice? Well, the interesting thing, and this is another word we're going to look at later, the word translated double is kaf pei lamed. How would you pronounce that? Couple. K-P-L. Couple. I'll do it a couple times. Well, that means double. But it also means duplicate. You make a duplicate. You fold something over, you make a duplicate copy. And so it's like, and even the rabbinical commentary in Stone's Tanakh here says, well, double because of this and that. And so they're running with this concept that kaf pei lamed means double, which seems unjust unless that's the terms and conditions. Like if it's 7 times, if it's 2 times extra, whatever it is. When Yahweh says 7 times like your sins there in Leviticus 26, that we're going to get in trouble, that's the curse, because the blessing is shin bet ayin, if you satisfy the vow. The word satisfy, the word vow is the number 7, shin bet ayin. That's what it means. And so the curse you get if you don't satisfy the vow is also 7. So is the way he does stuff multiply by 7? Well, where's this multiply by 2? So see, the way you're thinking causes you to read or understand or perceive what you think you're reading. But if you look in the dictionary and say, well, it also means to duplicate. Well, okay, so you make a couple duplications. It's like, if you know mishpat, your own way returned on your own head, that's a duplication. And that's absolutely fair, because that's what he said he's going to do. Your own way returned upon your head. Okay, now you look at the last verse in the book of Daniel, chapter 12. And it says, Daniel, go your way, live out your days, and you will come to your end and rest. Okay, there's the end. There's the tav. There's the finality. And arise to your portion at the end of days. Whoa, hey, there's something more. Arise to your portion at the end of days. Well, that looks like, if that's this TzADI sprouting back to life concept, how come it's the last thing said instead of what he said earlier in the chapter? Because we're at TzADI, and then after TzADI, there's QOOF, that's Q, Resh, Shin, Tav, R-S-T in the English alphabet. S-T. What about U, V, W, X, Y, Z? Well, those are all added letters in English that came from variations of the other phonetic letters. But this letter TzADI, just so you know, is the one letter out of the Hebrew alphabet that did not make it into Greek, Latin, or English. Therefore, it also stands alone compared to the other languages. And so I spell it, just so you know, with a capital T and then a lowercase z. See, because that's the pronunciation. TzADI. But you put it together, TzADI. It's not an ST and it's not a TS. Close to a TS, but it's a TZ. TzADI. So if you practice it, you can, it's like spelling the letter het. I write a capital C and a lower X, and it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, the C we think of as a hard sort of sound, and what's the next? Yeah, that's the way it sounds. That's a het. Just so you know, if I wrote a capital C and a capital X, you might think it's two letters. If I write a capital C and a lowercase x, oh, that's one letter with two sounds. Capital T, lower z. If it was capital T, capital Z, it would be Tav Zion. But if it's capital T, lower z, then it's like, oh, that's the TzADI. I had to come up with, well, how am I going to do something and keep it standardized so as not to be confusing? Just like if it's the letter capital P and capital H, that could be pay, hey. But if it's a PH phonetic, capital P, lowercase h, which would be a phay, pay and phay is the same exact letter in Hebrew. So once you start doing this stuff, you can make up your own rules for your own study if you want, but you got to think of something so you don't confuse yourself. So at the beginning of trying to learn these things, you can say, well, how do you do it? You can see what other people do, but then you got to figure out for your own mentality, for your own thinking processes, what works. And if you come up with a system which isn't so good, you might get confused later. You're going to have to correct your system. So I'm just throwing off these concepts as a way to say, well, figure out how to get your mind easily, you might say, entrenched in the language so you can move forward with it. But anyway, so the letter TzADI, if you back up the alphabet and compare the Hebrew to the English, let's just start with HIJK-LMNOP. HIJK. Well, I and J are the same letter. In English, they both, small letters, have a straight line with a dot. The I is the shorter, the J is longer. There wasn't a letter J until 1600s or so. In fact, the King James Bible, when it was first printed, spelled Jesus's name starting with the letter I, Jesu. There's a famous song, I think it's written in Latin, Jesu, joy of man's desiring. The point is, the letter J just became another letter I that was different for whatever reason. And when there was two letters side by side, the second one was made longer, so it became planted into the alphabet. But H, that would be the het. Though in Hebrew, the fifth letter, shaped like an E backwards, is the hey, which sounds like a H, hence the confusion of the word hua or Eva, Eva. But anyway, H-I-J-K, H-I-K, tet, there's no tet. Where'd the tet go? Well, the tet's the T sound, so that didn't really make it. If tav is the T, that didn't make it into the English alphabet either. But we do have a TH in the Greek letter theta, where that goes. But we don't have TH be its own letter. We could have, it didn't make it. But the point is, tet, forget the tet, yod, H-I-J, Kaf Lamed Mem Nun, J-K-L-M, N, Nun. What about the Samic? Well, that's the S sound. Well, so is the Shin the S sound. So we still have the sound, though it didn't make it as a second S sound in the English alphabet. O-P, there's I and Pei, TzADI. Q-R-S-T, those are the letters in sequence order. Kuf, Resh, Shin, Tav. But there's no TzADI. So I'm just showing you that's where the letters dropped out, moved over. And then the Vav, the sixth letter, or the Wa, sounds like a U, a V, an O, or a W. So you get U-V-W. Boy, those three letters are just borrowing the consonantal sounds of the Vav and sticking it back there, just to give you a placement of interesting, my own experience. Most of my life is somebody, if you're looking through the phone book and it's like, where's the letter H or where's the letter K? And it's like, H-O-J-K. Oh, and it's like, you've done this 10 million times. Why doesn't your brain grab it? But you open up the phone book, H-O-J-K. Oh, yeah. And it's like, but all of a sudden, when I started learning Hebrew, 20 years ago, once I got the Hebrew in my mind, it's like, I know where the letters are. I don't even have to go H-O-J-K or Kaf Lamed Mem. It's like, boom. For some reason, the pictures, the placement and the Hebrew alphabet, because I'm reading it as this narrative story, locked into my brain better than 50, 60 years of English did. That's kind of bizarre. Just for some reason, it had a different effect. Well, the TzADI is drawn as, they say, a fish hook. Again, in the paleo, it's the straight line with this number 2 shape, and that looks like a barbed fish hook, a gaff hook. You might say, well, if you're hunting fish, that's a weapon. But the word Zad, they say, means hunter. Well, the letter TzADI Dalet, see, this is spelled TzADI Dalet QOOF. TzADI Dalet, they say means side or flank or like this side compared to that side. What team are you on? What party are you with if there's a dispute or a conflict? Which side? Oh, that's the letter TzADI Dalet. And Dalet QOOF, just so you know, if you break down the 3-letter word spelled TzADI Dalet QOOF, and you look at TzADI Dalet, and then you look at Dalet QOOF, if TzADI Dalet is a side or a part, a party, a partisan, Dalet QOOF is Dak. So remember that kid's game, Dak, Duck, Goose. Well, you got Dalet Kaf, which is to crush or push down, but goose means to cut something out and like to cut and run, which is the way you play the game. Duck, 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 goose. And you get up and run around. Anyway, Dalet QOOF is also pronounced duck or daka, and it means meticulous, pedantic, punctilious, exact, minute, every little detail. It's almost like going around and the little kid touching the head of each one of the other kids sitting in a circle, and then the one he says goose, that one's picked out. So the concept of saying scrutinize carefully and find the distinction, well, that's kind of like what TzADI is. So I could look at TzADI Dalet QOOF and say, if Dalet QOOF means meticulously identify the difference or the distinction of this versus that, and TzADI is the letter that stands alone, is, hey, this is the guy that resurrected. Hey, this is the one that is the preeminent. This is the blossom. This is the flag. This is the identifiable characteristic of righteousness, Tzaddik. You see, these are all the concepts. So when you look at the letter TzADI, you can think, well, it means righteous or righteousness if it's TzADI Ka, because the hey suffix expression, in which case there's 4 letters or maybe 5 letters. You put TzADI Dalet Yod QOOF. Tzaddik is one who is a righteous man doing righteous. TzADI Dalet QOOF Hey, righteousness. TzADI Ka, which is also doing alms and charity and being pious and virtuous. So think of the letter TzADI, the resurrected one, the victorious one, righteous, doing what we're supposed to be doing, not only in the present tense, but also the one who's got the benefits having done it, pushing into the future. So if there's this transition letter, if you're on the face of the earth and you resurrect, TzADI, well, then what's after resurrection? Arise to your portion at the end of days. Well, if you arise, well, that's the word up from the grave here. Well, up from the grave, that's like the word kuf vav mem, as in the book of Isaiah, kumi ori, arise, kuf vav mem, like a comb, like the comb of a rooster, or the comb that has teeth sticking up, you comb your hair with. Arise and shine, or light, kumioria, rise and shine. Well, the letter kuf with a Q, our letter Q is the word then which is rising, and it's a circle with a line, kind of like our letter Q is a circle with a line off to the side. Or if you were to take the mouth of a jar and pour something out, then you'd have if you're looking at it, you have the mouth of the jar and a liquid's pouring out, you'd have a circle with a line. So this idea of something either like a balloon, that's like a round balloon with a string on it, it rises up, pouring something out, coming back down. The letter kuf is drawn, they say, is the back of the head, that which follows. So the word Yaakov, Yod, Ayin, Kuf, Bet, translated Jacob, is, oh, he overreaches, he supplants, but it also means to follow, like the wake of a ship, following after the ship. It's also footprint. If you walk through the, let's say, the sand in the desert and you leave footprints that are, or the snow, you can follow the footprints. You're leaving a trail. So the idea of leaving a trail and something following, if a guy passes by, what follows is the back of his head. That's where that concept. So TzADI and Kuf are related in that, hey, something opens up. TzADI, there's a flourish. Kuf rises up, but it's also coming back. So somebody once said, I heard that Cygnus the swan, the name of a constellation in the sky, related to the Kuf concept, meaning this, the legend, the story of this swan is that it takes off and goes flying on a route, a circuit, like the round shape of the letter Kuf, and it goes all the way around, and then it comes back. Well, Yeshua rising from the dead, 40 days later, he hung around for 40 days, and then he started to float up into the air. The clouds came, and his disciples were looking, and the angels came and said, hey, what are you looking at? It's like, well, didn't you see what he just did? And the angel said, hey, he's going to come back the same way, same place, same way as you saw him going up, he's going to come back. So the cloud can mean surrounded by foggy stuff, but when he comes back, it says in the book of Revelation, chapter 19, he's going to be surrounded by his hosts. And whether those are saints or whether those are angels, it's his TzADI Bet Ayin, or TzADI Bet Aleph, TzADI Bet Aleph, like the word Zevaot, TzADI Bet ALEF-TAV, which means army, host, legion, TzADI Bet Aleph. And Bet Aleph means to come or arrive. TzADI Bet is to inflate, to amass, like gathering together an army. Plural is Vav Tav, TzADI Bet Aleph Vav Tav, but if you look at TzADI Bet is to inflate, Aleph Vav Tav is a word. So again, you're taking that word and break it down into pieces, is a sign, a symbol, an oath, which is an agreement, like a Shin Bet Ayin, but it's also something, a glyph or a something here, X, sign your name here if you agree to this contract. It's like that symbol that means something. So it's also a letter of the alphabet. It's like some kind of corporate logo is an Aleph Vav Tav. So if it's a letter of the alphabet, you could read that as hosts are the letters of the alphabet. But if they're supposed to inflate and amass, then there's something about the letters as we know them. Again, this is going back to Jeremiah 31, that they will all know me. Aleph Tav Yod, I think is the word, or Aleph Vav Tav Yod, my oat. Translated just simply me, me. From the least of these to the greatest. And the word for least is katan, which is the cute, QOOF-TET, little, insignificant. And unto the migdolim, which is these great towers or these really important. So if I wrap my mind around saying that the cute little things, like Sesame Street, you teach your children how to read and how to recognize letters. They're not just letters. These are the foundations of the universe, both for now and eternity. This is the identifying of the Mashiach, being Yahusha, these 22 letters. These 22 letters are the face of Elohim. It's like, what do you mean his face? Well, Pei Nun. is the word face, or Penun Vav would be his face, the Vav suffix, but Penun also means sort, type, variety, category, class, genre. So he gave us these 22 types, expressions of his regard, his face, his countenance, or so when he says learn to read Kufresh Aleph, we're reading his face. It's kind of like Helen Keller, the blind lady who could feel somebody's face and know what they look like, or she could feel their mouth moving and know what they were saying. Same type of a thing. So if this idea of the TzADI, if we look at that and say, well, there's this one letter that's in Hebrew that's not in the other languages, and it has to do with hunting or fishing. It has to do with righteousness and victory. But if somebody's hunting you, you're in big trouble. There's a verse, he says he's going to send out the fishermen and then the hunters. It's like, well, is that against us, or is that like a time of tribulation? Well, what did he say? What are the rules? What he said was to Israel, he says, if you listen to my voice and do what I say, I'll be your champion and your defender. I won't even put any of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians. But if you don't listen to my voice, if you don't do what I say, then your enemies will get you. And the bugs and the wild animals and psycho torments of your own imagination will get you. And I'm going to turn my face against you. Penun turned against you. Well, see, the word Penun also means to be unconcerned. It's to be a bachelor. It's to go on vacation. It's to say, I have no regard. So if he turns his regard against us, you can pray all you want. He's not going to listen. He's not going to respond. And that's what he said he was going to do to Israel. And so there's this big question. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he said something about, oh, gosh, if there could just be justice, one of these days we'll get some justice. And it's like, what is justice? What is justice? He said, well, bad guys get what coming to them. The people who really been doing bad stuff, they really get in big trouble. They really get what for. It's like, no, justice also includes the other side. Justice also includes the people doing what's right, get paid, get rewarded, get compensated. And you have to stop and think, it's like, to see, what do you think of when you hear the word justice? But justice isn't just, you do this and you're going to get that. That's not justice. That's some kind of extortion, maybe, or some kind of a heavy-handed threat of, you better not. But justice has to be balanced scales, absolutely perfectly balanced. And if that's justice, then the idea of being perfectly your way coming back on you, you can't argue with that justice. So here's the point. If you do what Yahweh said, you get what Yahweh said you'd get. If you don't do what he said, you get what he said you're going to get. That's justice. That's the contract. That's the deal. So how do we know what he said to do? And then in talking to my friend, it's like, well, what would bring about justice? If we could say, if only there could be some justice on this planet, in this world, how do you stop those bad guys? How do you stop the people that are, let's just say, messing with scientifically altering nature, the weather, calamities such as earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes and droughts and floods and tsunamis and stuff like that? Why don't they just stop it? How do you bring justice to those guys? And Yahweh said, hey, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. King James, Yahweh said, that's my territory. And so the problem is, yeah, but you don't seem to be doing anything, or you don't do enough, fast enough, clear enough that we can see it and say, thank you very much. Those guys just keep doing stuff and getting away with it. So if he was ever going to say, oh, yeah, but there's a system, you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4. If you don't do 1, 2, 3, there's not going to be a 4. You have to do ALEF-BEIT Gimel Dalet. You have to go through this. Do you have to go through the 22 letters? If there's a process that just that's what it takes, then any failure along the way is going to circumvent the preceding detour route, stuck in an eddy. How do you get in the flow into the stream where he's going to bring his justice? Go back and do what he said. What did he say? And then there's this verse that says, Mishpat like water, TzADI like a raging river. So I forget where it is exactly, again, the address to tell you, but the idea is that what's Mishpat? Well, Mishpat like water. Well, Mishpat is balanced scales, equity, justice, man's way return on his own head. What does water do? Water finds its own level. So they have this way of doing construction work. You can have a level and try to read that in a plumb line, but there's a thing called a water level. So you could take a garden hose. It could be 5 feet long, or it could be 1,000 feet long. It doesn't matter. You put a clear end on both ends, a little special clear piece of vinyl screwed onto the end of the garden hose, and you fill it up so the water reads about halfway up the clear end. On this side, no matter where you go, you hold that end of the garden hose up, and with the line that the water is in that clear piece of the tube, and you look at the other end, it's exactly level no matter where you are. Like I said, you can go out 1,000 miles, it's going to be perfectly level, except for the curve of the earth. But other than that, it'll be perfectly level. That was just a joke. Anyway, the point is, water finds its own level. Mishpat, mem, shin, pei, tet. Mem is water. Well, shin is fire. Pei, tet means stalemate. If water prevails, it'll put out the fire. If fire prevails, it'll evaporate the water. But if there's this balance of humidity, maybe you could look at it like that, neither one of them prevailing over the other. And he says, Mishpat like water. Well, when everything's in perfect balance, TzADI like a raging river. Well, how can you have a raging river? Because the only way to get a raging river is if there's, instead of being perfectly balanced, you have it tipped, severely tipped. A slight tip, it's not going to rage river, it'll kind of flow, but a steep tip is. So if you try to wrap your mind around this picture, Yahweh's saying, Mishpat, balanced scales of equity, justice, are so important to him that TzADI, like a righteousness, like a raging river. See, TzADI is also victory, deliverance, salvation, justice, resurrection, all those other things we were talking about. Well, the only way for something to flow is when things are not level. So he gives us, do mishpat. You do balanced scales of justice. And when you do, it's going to tip the big teeter-totter in the sky, as it were, and suddenly the benefits of righteousness, victory, deliverance, salvation is going to rush in to fill you up on your side so that it brings back balance. Well, all we have to do then is do what's right. What's right? He told us what's right. TzADI is what's right. What's TzADI? Doing what he said, keeping the Torah. So see, this kind of like this big circle of logic. This is what I'm trying to give you a picture of. That because TzADI and Mishpat are the throne of Yahuwah, what that means is everything he does is based on this concept of what's TzADI compared to what's Mishpat. And Mishpat's like water, and TzADI is going to behave like water. And water finds its own level, and it's going to rush in to fill up and bring back to level what isn't level. So how do we do what's level? He thought of this system. He says, I'm going to tell you to do something. Now, when you do it, that's TzADI. So all you have to do is what I tell you to do. And then there's another verse somewhere that says, evil, wickedness weighs nothing. I can't remember where it is. I found it one time, but it's weightless. It weighs nothing. So if you have a big scale of balance and you put in, hey, I did what you always said. Okay, that weighs something. That's going to tip. Well, yeah, but there's a bunch of bad guys doing stuff. Yeah, but they don't weigh anything. So they can't push the scale back. You can only put stuff in the scale. If you don't do what Yahweh said, that's kind of a negative tzadikah, though that's wickedness, so it doesn't weigh anything. You can't tip the scale if you don't do what Yahweh said. But if you do what he said, that you put that in the scale, and that tips the scale, and then so tzadikah rushes in, victory, deliverance, and salvation, justice, in order to level things out. Well, if he said, you do what I said a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit of blessing, well, you do everything I said, and I'll give you all the blessing. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. So it's like, well, those bad guys are doing bad stuff. Well, how do we stop them? Start doing what Yahweh said. Well, what did he say? Help the widow, feed the orphan and the stranger, be kind to the stranger. Don't necessarily lock them up in concentration camps, and that's different matter. But my point is, how do you be kind to the stranger? He said, remember, Israel, you were strangers in Egypt, and I did that on purpose so you'd get a certain lesson stuck in your head. But what else do we do? The law. Go back under the law. By grace, we don't have to. No, wait a minute. But he said, doing what he said is called tzadikah. And if you do tzadikah, this is the law of the universe. If you do tzadikah, then according to Mishpat, he has to give you the blessing. And if you don't do tzadikah, according to Mishpat, the balancing of scales, you don't get the blessing. So if the only way to get the bad guys to get justice and make them stop the stupid bad stuff they're doing, because we don't necessarily have any bigger clout of finances or military to make somebody stop, all we can do is appeal to Yahweh, please make them stop. No, he says, look, I already told you the mechanism. Do what I said. And that's tzadikah. And so then the mishpat means that you get the blessing, and which means they get undone. What would you say to do? Stop working on the seventh day, and regard the Moedim, and call on my name, and learn how to read. Say, oh, come on, I don't need to learn how to read Hebrew. Kuf Resh Aleph means to learn how to read. Kara, Kuf Resh Nun, or Kuf Resh Aleph Nun is where they, in the Arabic language, get the word Quran, which is the thing you read, because Kuf Resh Aleph is Kara, learn how to read, and Nun is the object. Like if you stuck a mem in front of Kuf Resh Aleph, is the one who learns to read, or the thing that you read if you learn how to read. Arabic and Hebrew are related languages. But my point is, if every time I read the word Kuf Resh Aleph, I translate it, he called what? Hey, you. Is that what it means? But if I translate it, oh, he told us to learn how to read. Well, I wouldn't know that unless I already tried to learn how to read. But see, what I'm saying is that if every time you see the letter TzADI, you see, hey, he promised to give us the blessing and to rout our enemies if we do what he said. What did he say? Well, Jesus died on the cross, so it doesn't matter what he said. Oh, wait a minute. Except Yeshua rose from the dead. YHUH was his name. And he came back. So even though somebody tried to say, shut up, go away, he came back. So if he's the word made flesh, even though they tried to say, hey, it was done away with, then at a certain time when TzADI, the mouth, flourishes, the language is restored, Israel comes back from the time of exile and banishment. The language comes back, in which case we read, oh, this is really his name, Yahuwah and Yahusha, and so does his Torah. In which case we start doing that, and then we're doing tzadikah, so mishpat, which he has to do because that's what he always does, balances scales according to his own terms, which he said, tzadikah brings tzadikah. Righteousness, which is doing what he says, brings victory, deliverance, and salvation, which means our enemies are whooped and undone and negated of their otherwise usurping the blessings that he gave his people, which he had to take away and give to them because his people were stupid and didn't listen to his voice and turned away. So he banished his people, gave all their stuff to the enemies and said, you can hang on to it until I bring my people back, and I'll bring my people back when they start listening to my voice and do what I said, as per Deuteronomy 30. So what I'm trying to say is that this whole system is wrapped up just looking at that letter TzADI. TzADI is this flag of representation. TzADI is the picture of the resurrection of the what? The butterfly that used to be the caterpillar. Unto what? QOOF-YOD-TET. Rising up, ascending, going up into the heavens, the sky, and coming back with hordes of multiplication of power and might and prestige and honor and glory and majesty. Sheen of Resh. That's what's in front of us. But TzADI is this. So between TzADI and then QOOF, well, TzADI, he's still on earth. QOOF is raising up. QOOF is coming back. So QOOF is like the picture of the come around like Cygnus the Swan going on the circuit and coming back. How long is the circuit? 2,000 years? Whatever it might be. But TzADI is this flourishing on the earth. Coming back as Resh, well, that's the guy that TzADI'd also then comes back as Resh. But Resh is unto the lifted up stature. TzADI is of the conquering triumphant moment where Pei open. Well, what's Pei? Pei comes after Ayin. And if Ayin is the eye of understanding, seeing, weighing, balancing, do you get it? Can you put it all together? Oh, I see. Well, I see. That's the Pei of the Ayin. And then the TzADI is like, wow, there's the flourishing. So I'm trying to show you this engineered structure of Samic. The menorah shape, like the tree, like the skeleton, the backbone and ribs, and the way it's all designed, chemistry, mathematics, all the connections of how it fits together bears fruit, it works, it functions, and then so that if you can look at the functioning, ironing the Ayin, oh, okay, I see that. Well, that Pei TzADI, see, Ayin TzADI, etz is the word tree, and it also means to take counsel, to have your eye open, but it also means to have your, like the word tree, it also means wood. It means your eye can't see. It turns to wood, like petrify, turn to stone. This is lignify, turn to wood. How does your eye turn to wood? Back in the old days, if you went blind, they'd carve an eye out of wood and stick it in there. Now they probably use some kind of polymer, plastic or something. But the idea is that your eye doesn't function. So Ayin TzADI can mean that it either functions or doesn't function. But Ayin Pei, that's the word for bird. Oof. Or to spread a wing, or to, hey, this spread a wing, and TzADI then is like to take off into the wind, and then QOOF is like to really go up there. But see, again, Ayin, Samic Ayin, Pei, TzADI, QOOF. If you can get a feel for what's happening, then you're not just memorizing MNSOPQRS. Try to get a feel for the picture of what's happening. Back at that Zion, well, the Zion is the seventh letter. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So the letter G is the Z sound, the Zion. Well, the letter G is drawn as two circles with a hook. That's one way of drawing the English G, but that was like this disc pulled behind a plow. Think of that as it digging up the soil. If you're a two-pronged rake digging furrows for the garden, the whip on YHUH's back being put to the weapon, that's the Zion being put to the weapon. That's the seventh letter. He's cut off. You dig furrows in the ground, you throw the seeds in, the seed's no longer in your hand, it's now buried in the dirt, it's now buried in the earth. It's Yeshua being then put into the het, being buried in the earth of the tomb, of the crypt, the grave, the sepulcher. Het. Yeah, but that's the seventh letter, like the Sabbath day, cut off from the other six, separated, segregated, made the Kadosh day, the different specifically designated different day than all the rest of the package of seven, but the seventh is unlike all the other six. So then if you look at the Mishkan pattern, you have Het Tet Yod, Kaf Lamed, Mem Nun, there's 3 groups. Samik Ayin Pei, there's another 3. And then TzADI, there's a 7. But as the secret code, there's a group of 3, a group of 2, 2, 3 individuals, which are 3, Samik Ayin Pei, like in the covered place. And then TzADI, that's the 7th. So I can say, well, according to that pattern, Zion is equivalent to the Sabbath day, but also TzADI is equivalent to the Sabbath day. Even though one's the crucifixion and the other one's the resurrection. But see, that ties them together. Zion's a weapon, and if you've got a fish hook or a hunter, TzADI's a weapon. So even though you could say, well, it's like a flag, and well, crown of thorns, the crown of thorns is a weapon, but that's like a corona, that's like this other consideration of Zion, and it's like to designate as special, unique, set apart, kadosh is Zion, to be ornamented with weapons. For the officer in the military to have a ceremonial sword, for the king to have a crown, those are all Zion concepts. Just like TzADI stands alone is the Zion concept. Yes, Carla?
5 minutes.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to show you is that the Z sound of Zion and the TZ sound of TzADI, well, the word Zion, like Mount Zion, a place over in Tennessee or North Carolina called Zionville, they spell it Z-I-O-N. Well, which Hebrew letter is that? If it's Z, technically it should be the Zion, the 7th letter. But you look in the dictionary and it's a TzADI. Because we don't, in English, pronounce it with a T. So again, what I'm saying is that if you sit there and try to wrap your mind around this and say, why don't they just do it a certain way so that, because nobody cares and nobody wants you to learn this. You got to do it for yourself. What is the Yod-Vav Nun, Zion? What does that mean? You can't even find that necessarily in the dictionary telling you that it's the Yod-Vav Nun. You have to see it as the suffix of other words that they'll give you definition. It's one who's participating in the action of the verb. You might say, well, what's TzADI Yod? TzADI Vav is command. So TzADI Yod's got to be the one who gives the command. My command. I'm the commander. So Yod-Vav Nun is the suffix, means the one who's under command and doing what the commander says. But you won't find that as the definition of Zion. You'll find Zion as a definition as a ship in the water, TzADI Yod, a dry place, a desert dweller, or you might find it to be a billboard or a signpost. And it's like, what's that got to do? Well, a billboard or a signpost is, here, make this known. Driving down the highway and it's like, hey, eat at Joe's bar, down the road 5 miles. Oh, okay. Giving information. And it's like, what's that got to do with TzADI Yod-Vav Nun? Might be a tombstone, TzADI Yod-Vav, some marker indicator. And it's like, well, the 10 Commandments, as we know them, were commands of the commander, but it's not for everybody. You'll hear the Christian church, some of the Christian church, say, hey, those got nothing to do with us. Those are for the Jews. So for somebody to say, hey, I got nothing to do with that list of laws, we got Jesus. Okay, that's your distinction. But the first commandment was in Exodus 20 and in Deuteronomy 5 was Anoki Yahuwah Eloheka. Talking to a guy the other day, what's the first commandment? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. No, that's the second commandment. The first commandment was him identifying himself, which isn't a command. It was a statement of information. It was a statement of fact. Anoki, I am. Yahuwah Eloheka, your Elohim. Who's you? I just took you, Israel, out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery and oppression. Well, if that's not you, then he's not your Elohim. In which case, this has nothing to do with you because that was the address. From to. And if you can't identify with the to, then it has nothing to do with you. But you see, if the 10 Debarim, the 10 matters, was a type of contract or an agreement, a sworn oath. This is the law. You do this and you get blessed. You don't do this, you get cursed. If that's what that's about, then if somebody says, hey, that's not ours, then you can't do what he said and get the blessing that he promised for doing what he said, in which case you can't do Tzedakah, which means you don't get his mishpat of benefit. And if what he said was on the 4th commandment, You must, Israel, keep the regard, keep the sanctity of Yom HaShabbat, the Sabbath day. Then that's what he said. So if you keep the Sabbath day, you get TzADI blessing, the scales tip, and like a mighty river, his stuff floods in. But if an enemy, like the Nachash, serpent in the garden, like Moshe, the last words out of his mouth, your enemy will try to deceive you. Like he said to Abraham, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, your children must listen to my voice. Huh? The preacher, the priest, the prophet said, don't keep the law because that's going back under the law instead of grace. If they're able to trick us to not do what he said, we don't get the TzADI because we're not doing TzADI. And that's Mishpat. So to understand that Mishpat means Yahuwah will always give what's coming to us. Man's way return on his own head. And he set up the system that said, I'm going to tell you to do something. And when you do it, I'm going to give you the benefit of doing it. That's Mishpat. And if you don't do it, you get the problem of not doing it, which is Mishpat. And understanding that then, when we go into part 2 here in just a moment, is what David was talking about. And we'll go through and read his statements with that in mind, with this TzADI stuff. And hopefully you'll see this in a whole different way than reading these verses might have led you to think is what he was saying without this into consideration. And then we're going to look at some interesting stuff, if I can get there, in Isaiah 35 and 40. Anyway, time to take a break here.